Hello, my name is Mark Hagee, and I want to present to you my model of leadership, which I base off of skipping stones. This model, I like to think of skipping stones as bringing one's leadership influence to bear. And one can compare skipping stones with leadership in a variety of different ways, and I want to break that down into two large categories. The first of which is the controllable aspects of skipping stones, and the uncontrollable aspects of skipping stones, and their relation to leadership. So the controllable aspects of skipping stones, I'm sure there's plenty more, but the ones I'm going to talk about here are the technique you end up using, how much you practice skipping stones, what stone you choose to throw, how you prepare your throw, and the release. So first, we have your technique. And I want to compare this in leadership to learning. We have an amazing opportunity to learn about leadership. Similarly, one can learn about skipping stones. So that can happen through just being taught, as in like leadership classes, personal experience of going out and skipping stones, as well as being in leadership situations and roles, reading up on leadership material, just like you can read about the conditions for skipping stones. And then learning by following what others have done. You can do this by, if you have an older brother or someone who likes to skip stones, and you can learn from their experience and they can teach you. Similarly in leadership, we don't have to always reinvent the wheel. Next, there's practice. And practice in skipping stones is like the experience that you gain when you go out and take on leadership. So if you want to practice, you should skip stones whenever you can. And similarly in leadership, if you want to become a better leader, you should be in leadership roles and learn what works and learn what doesn't work. So you make mistakes, as we all will, and learn from those and take notes, and you will become a better and better leader as you practice and gain experience. Another controllable aspect of skipping stones is choosing which stone you throw. And I relate this in leadership to the approach. And so when we choose a stone, we can choose to either a rough or a smooth stone. And I like to think of this as the choice between what kind of behavior you have. So we have Model 1 behavior and Model 2 behavior. And of course, we always want to have the kind of behavior that is going to be the most effective in our leadership approach. Just as in stone skipping, there is almost no time when choosing a rough stone is going to get you a better result while you're skipping your stone. So we always want to choose the behavior where we are uplifting others and working with them, always being conducive to good leadership qualities and traits, and we're showing that in our behavior. Next, we can choose what size of rock we want to choose. And similarly in leadership, we can choose, okay, do I want to make a big splash here? Do I want to just shake everything up? Or do I want to just gently guide things? Sometimes it can be harder to throw a large rock. And similarly, it can be hard to exert a really large influence on a group of people. And so we get to choose what kind of influence we want to bring to bear. Next, and related, we have to choose a rock that we can actually handle, something that we can bear ourselves. So some rocks are just far too large for us, and our strength cannot effectively try to skip that. And similarly in leadership, we can't always take over every single situation, and we get to choose and decide if we want to try to do that. But when we do, no matter what we choose, commitment needs to be involved. Can you bear the consequences of becoming the team leader on a certain project? And if you can, then you should take it. If you want to. But if you can't, and you can't put that commitment in there, then maybe you should step back and let others lead. Next, we have the wind-up, which I consider preparation. The wind-up is, in throwing stones and throwing anything, is bringing your arm back to throw. And it's how you prepare yourself for that particular throw. And in leadership, it's really much more than that. It's preparing yourself for whatever the task is that you might be leading or facilitating. So much goes into preparation, and and I believe goes into making one effective as a leader related to preparation. When a leader is unprepared, they will have a very difficult time communicating clearly what their goals and expectations are. And also, there may be things that they have not considered that they could have easily been prepared for had they done the work required to do that. And if others notice and others recognize that the leader is not prepared, they will lose confidence in them. And so, in every situation, when one is a leader, I believe that they should do everything in their power to be as prepared as they can be, similarly to how they wind up while skipping stones. And finally, the last parallel of controllable aspects between skipping stones and leadership is the release, how one lets go of the rock. And I relate this to execution. When one releases, they can throw with a high angle, they can throw straight into the water, and this may or may not be very effective. Or they can throw with a slightly lower angle, but sometimes it's too low. Well, similarly, in leadership, we need to be aware of our approach. We get to decide with what tone we deliver a message, and who we tell that message to, and in what context we tell them. In all these ways, a leader should be aware of the execution of their influence on others, in the hopes that they be as effective as possible. Additionally, you can throw very fast or very slow. And I like to think maybe this is like being very aggressive in your leadership communication or being more laid back. I personally enjoy being more of a laid back person and hearing comments from other people. But sometimes in a certain situation, being more aggressive would be more helpful. And this model helps me to think about, okay, how am I going to deliver this message? And what's going to help make me the most effective I can possibly be? And finally, we have spin. In skipping stones, an essential part is adding spin to the rock that we throw. And I like to think of this as the confidence that one brings with their leadership decisions and the way they hold themselves. When one has confidence in their abilities and their decisions, I think others can see that and they'll be much more comfortable in following along and working together towards that aim. If a leader is unsure about their leadership abilities or the decisions that they've made as a leader for a group, I believe the group recognizes that and it decreases the leader's ability to be effective leading that group. And so I think one should do everything they can in their leadership to be confident about their decisions and press forward with 100% commitment towards them. The same as when skipping stones, one should almost always add spin to their throw. Next, I want to talk about the uncontrollable aspects of stone skipping. So these are things like the condition of the water, the ripples that the stone throw leaves behind, and the number of skips that the stone throw ends up accomplishing. And so the condition of the water I like to think of as the political environment, or what's going on around. And so when one skips stones, you might have a fast or a slow current around there. And in a leadership environment, this might be like sometimes some environments are extremely fast paced and things must be done very quickly. Or in others, things are much more laid back and things take a long time to get accomplished. Well, one should be aware as a leader of what kind of environment they work in. If things take a long time, maybe that leader should not expect and push for things to be done within 24 hours. They should be aware of what's going on around them and take that into consideration when they're approaching their leadership. Next, there can be rocks or logs in the water when skipping stones. I've had times when I skipped a stone and it just hit something right away that I couldn't have seen, and it just died and it fell, and it didn't go very far at all. Well, sometimes in leadership there is opposition out there, and sometimes you can be aware of that, just like sometimes you can see a rock, but sometimes you can't. It may not surface until you bring your leadership influence to bear. But nevertheless, a leader should understand that sometimes people will disagree with you. When this happens, the leader has to decide how they're going to handle that situation. But being aware of that and preparing for possible inconveniences that your decisions might make for others, and always taking other people's opinions into consideration will help to minimize the negative effects of people's opposition. Next, we have a rough or a flat water surface. So I like to think of this as maybe there are other people that are also bringing their influence to bear, and they're making waves. Sometimes when a leader decides to do something, their own influence can be working against the influence of other people. So if one's trying to make a decision to go one direction and another leader comes in and tries to make a decision going the opposite direction, there can be a lot of tension there and create some pretty rough waters that'll make it very difficult to skip stones or to be effective as a leader. One should be aware of what others are doing around them and try to work with them and work together so that their waves and their influence all work together. Next, we have the ripples that are left behind after skipping a stone. And I like to think of this as one's influence on others. When the stone hits the water, the ripples move out from where the stone hits. This is like people reacting to that influence. And one cannot know exactly how that stone is going to hit the water, similarly to how a leader can't know exactly how that influence is going to be taken by others that it impacts. But nevertheless, there will be an effect, whether it's large ripples that move away or small ripples. And finally, we have the number of skips that the stone will take. And I like to think of this as the long-lived influence of a leader. So sometimes when we skip a stone, it hits the water once and it's done after that. But other times we skip a stone and it continues to go out and move and affect the water very far away from where we initially threw it. Sometimes the influence that we bring to bear has a much larger effect than we may ever know or recognize. If you encourage someone to be self-controlled, and that message continues to be passed on and it influences others, then cumulatively the leader's effectiveness and their effect on other people is much larger than just that initial conversation might have had or that influence they brought to bear, much more than they would have expected. So in conclusion, I think that there are many different parallels between skipping stones and bringing one's leadership influence to bear. And there are controllable and uncontrollable aspects of both that one should consider. I hope you'll find that thinking about leadership in this way will help remind you of the many different aspects of leadership that one should consider when going into leadership situations, and that it'll be as much of a help to you as it has been for me.